What does it mean to have something or to own something? And how does ownership relate to the concept of non-duality? Non-duality points to this idea that there's not two, and that there's a lack of separation between things. And if that's the case, doesn't this lack of separation really negate the idea of ownership altogether? Well, keep watching and let's discuss. I'm Russ Rapp, and welcome to my YouTube channel about nothing, or no thing. It's where I like to talk about non-duality, what non-duality means, or maybe what it doesn't mean. But let's get right into this idea of ownership. And think back to when you were a kid, or if you watch children play, a lot of times they take ownership of the things that they're playing with. And so you'll see a young child say, well, that's mine, mine, and they'll take toys away from other children. And so a lot of times kids, their idea of what's theirs changes, and their attention span is really short. And so in the moment they have a toy that's theirs and they don't want any other kid to play with it. But eventually they lose interest, or you give them another toy, and then that new toy becomes the thing that is theirs, and they've lost all idea of the old toy that they were playing with. It's just that one in that very moment that they concern themselves with. And if you see, as kids get older, there's games that they play that kind of showcase this idea of ownership. One of the ones that I remember as a child is, you have a big mound of snow, and kids will play a game called King of the Hill, where the winner of the game is the king on top, and so all the other kids try to climb up the hill and try to take over the top of the snow mountain and become the new king of the hill. And so the whole game is to try to keep the king, to try to keep everyone else off the top. And so there's the satisfaction knowing that this snow mountain is mine, and so the winner of the game ultimately takes ownership of the hill. And so as we get older, we have things that we take ownership of as adults, and so we own a house, we have a mortgage, we have a car that maybe we have a loan on, and so, or we own the title. So this idea of ownership is something that is a part of our everyday life. And so, you know, if you have a car, it's something that you drive to work, let's say, or you drive to school or to church or wherever you may be going. And so this idea of owning a car is something that on one hand is abstract or conceptual, whereas you may own the title, a piece of paper saying that you own the car, or you have your stuff in it. But really a lot of times this idea of if ownership comes from, you know, the old saying that ownership is 9/10 of the law, or possession is 9/10 of the law. And so if you own a car on paper, or if you own the title, really what makes you think in the physical level that the car is yours is through the habit of driving it day in and day out. And so you really start to learn that car is yours just from the habit of driving it. And so there's kind of different ways to look at ownership in a more conceptual way, or more of a visceral, real world way, where you use something, or take a house that you live in. When you own a house, you're able to say you're welcome to come in, or maybe you can't come in, or you can decorate your lawn a certain way, or paint your bathroom, or whatever you're doing to the house. By taking ownership of it and knowing that you have the control to change things gives you that sense of ownership. And I touched on this idea of social contracts with houses, mortgages, cars, titles, where we agree that maybe you have an agreement with a bank that you took out a loan to have this car, they have the title, and eventually you make payments to pay off that loan, and so you can have the control of the title and take ownership of that on that level. And money is another example of how we think of ownership. And if you take the car example, you look at your car, and in the English language, we all know what a car is. It's it's something with wheels that takes you from one place to the other. You put gas, or maybe it's an electric car or whatever. But we all know that there are cars that are modes of transportation. And so, you know, the next level of ownership is when you start saying it's my car. But we all know there's some cars that are more expensive. Maybe it's an older car that has a lot of miles, and so it's not worth as much. And so there's another layer of concept that we as humans put on, meaning that we give to things in the physical realm. So you see a car, you understand that it's there, you understand its purpose as far as transporting you from one place to the other. You understand it's yours because of the habit of driving it every day, and knowing that where you park it, you have the keys, that it's yours. But then there's this other layer of ownership with titles and paperwork. And then on top of that is this concept of money. And I always wanted to do this in a YouTube video because I see it in all these marketing videos, or, you know, get rich quick schemes where they hold that money, and I know this is only $4, but so what they do is they go like this. And so I always kind of wanted to do this in a video. So there you go. I got to live my dream. But this concept of money is another layer to ownership, where, I mean, really all this is right here is mostly a cotton and some ink and different things that are woven together. And we subscribe, and granted this is just $1, so maybe to you watching this you think, oh, that's not a lot of money. You can't even buy a 20-ounce pop or soda anymore. So it really doesn't have much value. But if this one was a 100, you may start thinking, well, now that has value. And so a wad of pieces of cotton that have ink on them put together that have $100 on them, that can have a lot of effect. People will want to potentially rob you for, if this was 10 $100 bills, so $1,000. And ideally, all this is really is just a social contract to know that this money has value because of the value or the meaning that we give it. And so really, if you think of it in this way, if you were the last person on earth, so let's say you're watching this video and all of a sudden everyone, you know, disappears and you're all of a sudden all alone. Granted, I don't know, I'm assuming your phone service would, or your computer service would still be working, but just follow me here. So you're watching this video, all of a sudden there's no more people on earth. This dollar bill here, or $100 or whatever you have it, really has no meaning. And because, I mean, what are you going to do with it? Maybe, you know, use it for a napkin or something. But really its value that people sometimes harm others for really loses all of its meaning. And maybe you're thinking, well, so what? We have social contracts. We have an understanding that there's value in that piece of paper. And you can take it a step further and go into the fact that most of our money in the money supply is digital. It's not even a physical item that you can hold in your hand anymore. It's just zeros and ones on a computer screen. And so, but if you have so many numbers in your bank account that your bank agrees to that it has value, and you can go to the store and buy stuff with it, from a practical, pragmatic sense, yeah, it has value, but it's still the meaning that we give it. And so let's talk about your body or my body. Assuming, you know, for me, I've got 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, heart, and a brain. So I have this body, and I think it is something that I own. So I can move my body around the way I want it to, but sometimes your body does things that you don't want it to do. So maybe you end up tripping down the stairs. Ideally, you probably wouldn't have wanted to trip down the stairs, but sometimes it happens because you can't always control your body. And a lot of your what makes your body work is involuntary, where your heart pumps on its own, and your lungs do its job, or your brain functions without you really taking the willpower to really control that yourself. And sometimes, you know, people do things to your body that you don't want them to be done, and so it's you feel like you have an ownership of it, but sometimes that gets violated. And so, this idea of that you have total control of your body, it kind of falls short sometimes. And the other thing, if you separate your mind and your body conceptually, you have these thoughts, and so you have feelings and thoughts, or what I like to say is your inner world. And so a lot of times in meditation, things is observing your thoughts or your feelings and just watching them shift and change and alter, and just being present with them. And one thing as it relates to non-duality, is if you understand that your thoughts and your feelings and what you see as an inner world is really, in a sense, if you look at it as an outer world of objects, even though it's not really a physical object, it is an object that you can observe. It really starts to put into perspective of who you are, because if you're not these physical things, who are you behind that? And the other thing I just wanted to touch on quick is, when it comes to ownership, is this idea of time. And like the Merovingian in the Matrix says, how do you have time if you don't take time? A lot of times we as human beings want to have control over time, but ultimately time, whether it exists or not, really can be used in a pragmatic sense. But if you try to stop time, if you want to, let's say you want to figure out some answer to a question or a problem that you have, and you want to have time to stop because you're not ready to move forward, time really doesn't really care if you stop or not. It's just going to be what it is. And so the idea of owning time really is something that ultimately kind of fades away, because it's not something that we can have ownership of as well. And so really everything that I've talked to here is really, in a sense, a concept or an idea of what it means to have ownership. And what it does, it really it always puts it in a perspective of how you, or what you perceive as you, relate to things in the outside world. And so what ends up happening is you feel like you can have something, it gives you a sense of self. And so the question I would ask you is really, where is that self that can take ownership of things in the outside world? And so if you really sit with that a while, you start to kind of see where non-duality plays into this. And ultimately, when it comes to ownership and having things, it's one of those, like, here's a good example where I want to take a moment to think through what I'm saying, and right now it's not coming out, but the video keeps moving forward regardless of the point that I'm trying to make. And so I'm going to actually leave you with that, because ultimately I'm going to leave it up to you to really sit with this and use it or not use it the way you will. So I just want to say thank you for watching this video today, and if you like it or if you don't like it, I still want you to click the like button or maybe make some comments. And until next time, I just want to say peace. It's been real and unreal.